welcome. This is India Sense. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. We've got a power-packed lineup of stories that matter to India, its rise and its growth. But first up, the headlines. The gloves are off in Bangladesh. Student organizations now boycott. Anti-discrimination students movement dialogue termed the movement that ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina as a government-backed student organization. What should be India's options as commentary from Dhaka turns strident against New Delhi? We get you that answer. A week of massive political turmoil from France to South Korea. Sitting presidents struggle with fractured polity. In both Paris and Seoul, Parliament not governed by sitting president's party. Chaos and political uncertainty in nations ranked much higher than India in Democracy Index. Second quarter GDP data shocks India. Growth slows to its lowest since 2020. We tell you what can be done and why India needs to now look at long-term reforms to get back on the 8% growth highway. US President-elect Donald Trump is racing to complete his administration in record time. Picks David Perdue as China ambassador and former PayPal COO David Sachs as White House AI czar, even as several picks are facing uncertain future. Are Trump's picks problematic, or is there more to it? One of USA Inc.'s biggest voices shot dead in broad daylight on a busy Manhattan street. 24 hours later, the police make little progress in the manhunt, raising questions about the safety and law and order in the world's biggest financial center. Setbacks in Syria continue for the Bashar al-Assad government as Syrian rebels led by Baghdadi's close aide take over Hama after taking over Aleppo. India Sense decodes how Syria is impacting the Middle East and who stands to gain and who is the biggest loser. Our first story, the big story in fact on India Sense, is what's happening in Bangladesh and the power struggle that is now coming to fore. It seems that Bangladesh's political crisis is far from over. It started as a battle for the national unity among students and activists, has now in fact turned into a bit of a political contest and a struggle. Bangladesh saw 19 student organizations from across the country unite for the National Student Solidarity Week, which started from the 26th of November. But after a week, now there are cracks that have appeared. The political student organizations, including the BNP student wing and some of the left-wing groups, have refused to attend a key dialogue. Why did they do so? Because they feel this is now mainstreaming of some of the extremist ideologies that some factions actually propagate. And in fact, they criticize the interim government for excluding certain factions and preferring those that have a more extremist ideology. Only a handful of student groups were actually selected, and those that were affiliated with the Islamic parties, whether it's the Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami or the Islami Andolon Bangladesh. And beyond that, most stayed away. They claim that the anti-discrimination student movement has now become a puppet of the government. It's no longer inclusive, but fueling division. Divisions that have only come to light in the last 4 months in Bangladesh. One such group, in fact, took to the streets with a different message. They said they wanted justice for the violent killings that marred the July uprising, something that Awami League has been really focused on and has been seen as the primary culprit of. But the absence of unity amongst these student leaders reflects the larger struggle that Bangladesh is facing. It's at a crossroads. There are economic problems, there are political problems, and of course there are now larger geopolitical problems, particularly the fact that Bangladesh's commentary, particularly from the government, is becoming more and more strident against India, almost baiting it. Of course, India hasn't taken the bait so far, but the fact is that is likely to cause more headwinds, more challenges for the Yunus government. And in fact, as Bangladesh burns, we are now going to focus on what all should India be doing and what are India's options, given the fact that minorities, particularly the Hindu minorities, have been facing the wrath of extremist ideologies, extremist organizations. Now, there are a couple of things that India needs to focus on and navigate this volatile situation. Options are limited, but there are some options. First and foremost, the diplomatic strategy, as has been the case so far, communication lines must remain robust. They must remain up and running, because who knows who will make way for Mohammad Yunus's interim government as and when elections take place. No one knows. Will it be another extremist ideology-led government? Even in that situation, if communication lines remain open, if cultural ties, historic ties, language-related ties all remain robust, that will make for continued communication between the two governments. As far as mistreatment of minorities is concerned, India has been calling that out repeatedly and must continue to do so. There are caveats in place as well. These are Bangladeshi citizens. Of course, they must get exactly the same treatment that any other Bangladeshi citizen must get as per the Bangladeshi constitution. But they are Bangladeshi citizens, and India must call them out, but do so with exercising utmost restraint. What it can do is it can ensure that aid and financial support can continue for and must continue for Bangladesh. The economy has seen a major collapse. There are large sections of Bangladeshi society which do want to have good ties with India. And in those circumstances and those people, they get emboldened, they get strengthened when aid continues from India, when grant continues from India. Remember, this is exactly what India did even during the times of crisis that Sri Lanka faced. The economic turmoil did not stop India from extending that big brotherly hand which lifted Sri Lanka out of its economic misery. In Bangladesh, things are different because, of course, there are extremist ideologies at play. But as I said, if India continues to extend that hand of friendship, some of these voices, extremist voices, may be reduced and may in fact be weakened by some of the other voices in Bangladeshi society, because not all want to stay away from India. They realize the importance, the significance of having ties with India, with New Delhi, which continues to be the big brother. And last but most importantly, India needs to continue to exercise restraint. It's been doing so and needs to continue doing so going forward as well. Shifting focus to the Indian economy, which is our first wide angle on this show. India has been the fastest growing economies in the last few years, aspires to be a $7 trillion economy in the next couple of years and is almost on track. But the latest GDP data for the second quarter has been a shocker and also a reason to now recalibrate. Growth has slowed to the slowest in the last 4 years. The recalibration needs to take place to ensure that the challenges and the opportunities that may come up during Trump 2.0, India is in a position to grab them with both hands. Yes, there will be high tariffs, but there will also be greater decoupling from China. If India has its reform agenda in place, if it's able to address to some of the data points that the GDP numbers throw up, it will be in a better position. And how does it go about doing that? This report tells you. Riding on the wave of world-beating 8.2% growth last year to a below expectations growth rate of just 5.4%, the growth outlook for India has suddenly sombered. The manufacturing sector, a crucial engine for India's economy, is now sputtering, with construction and automobiles feeling the pinch. The manufacturing PMI fell to an 11-month low of 56.5 in November. Add to this the general election cycle that halted the government's capex. The GDP shocker has forced brokerages to cut their FY25 GDP growth projections for India. RBI's 7.2% growth outlook now looks difficult. Most analysts now expect the full-year growth to be around 6%. But perhaps the most worrying statistic is the fall in real wage growth and declining urban consumption, reflected in the results of FMCG companies. This also tells what exactly the government needs to do. pump priming the economy cannot go on indefinitely, and with the intent to cut fiscal deficit, government capex cycle is unlikely to be the primary growth vehicle. Private sector investments need to pick up. Government needs to create a robust mechanism for boosting manufacturing. Textiles, which has seen the sharpest decline, can pick up due to the headwinds the Bangladeshi textile industry is currently facing. This will create jobs. Urban middle class has traditionally been one of the strongest supporters of the BJP and also a votary of big-ticket reforms. Present economic downturn has hit this segment hard. The question remains, will this slowdown be like the 2019 one, before COVID set in? Or will the government be able to arrest this with a mix of reforms and rate cuts? Time will tell, but the country's resilience and ingenuity have always been its greatest assets. The other big story and the other wide-angle story on the show. Well, another week, another round of drama that's unfolding in Trump 2.0's upcoming cabinet. In what could be the biggest shake-up yet, the president-elect's choices for key positions are now pretty much crumbling because of the scandal and controversy they are facing. The question is, what really is going on behind doors? And are these just bad picks, or is this something deeper that's really at play here? Take a look at this report that tells you.
Donald Trump's second-term cabinet is facing a major crisis. 3 key picks have now withdrawn, throwing his leadership plans into disarray. First up, Pete Hegseth, the outspoken Fox News host, Trump loyalist, and former military advocate who was supposed to take the reins of the Pentagon. But now, his nomination is in hot water following explosive whistleblower reports and troubling documents surfacing about his past. Accusations of financial mismanagement, sexist behavior, and repeated intoxication on the job have put Hegseth's confirmation in jeopardy. It seems Trump's so-called star pick is now a liability, and the Pentagon has become a political football. Hegseth is now caught in a web of scandal that's difficult to escape. What happened to the man who was once considered the face of a new generation of military leadership? Is he the right man for the job, or just the wrong man at the wrong time? And let's not forget Matt Gaetz. Just days ago, the Florida congressman was nominated to be Trump's attorney general, only to withdraw in the wake of a sexual scandal. It has thrown his career and Trump's inner circle into chaos. A nomination that seemed like a good fit suddenly unraveled, with the scandal overshadowing any hopes of moving forward. But the hits just keep coming. Chad Chronister, Trump's pick to fill another key role, has now backed out, citing his desire to stay sheriff of Hillsborough County, Florida. Chronister, too, has faced opposition from Republicans. His rather colorful history, both in and out of law enforcement, has made him an easy target for critics. His past videos, now circulating wildly on social media, have painted him in an unfavorable light, with detractors slamming his fitness for high office. What's becoming clear is that Trump's dream team is looking more like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. So why is Trump's team crumbling? Are these just bad appointments, or is something bigger at play? Some say it's simply a case of bad judgment, choices that were rushed without considering the full scope of the individuals involved. Others argue there's a darker, more systemic issue. Whatever the reason, one thing's clear: this is the worst string of appointments we've seen in modern political history. It's a game of musical chairs where the music keeps stopping and everyone's getting up at the wrong time. With each name that drops out, with each nomination that crashes and burns, Trump's cabinet looks less like a well-oiled machine and more like a sinking ship. So, is this a conspiracy, a grand political scheme, or are these just the worst ever picks any American president-elect has made? As always with Trump, the answer is anything but clear. But one thing is certain: in this game of high stakes, the players and the stakes are getting bigger by the minute.
We now turn our attention to Syria, where there have been a stunning turn of events in the last 1 week. And in fact, it's set to alter the entire region, with another key city set to fall into the hands of the rebel groups. And the Assad regime is now facing a very real prospect of losing power. And India Sense is now going to decode what this means for all the major stakeholders. Who stands to win, who stands to lose. And there are about 5 key stakeholders here, apart from several others. Let's take them all one by one. First up, Turkey. A possible fall of the Assad government is a huge victory for Erdogan. Turkey will expand its influence. Remember, from 1516 till about 1918, Syria was in fact part of the Ottoman Empire. And that's exactly what Erdogan will now be telling and saying to his domestic audience when Turkey increases its influence in Syria. Secondly, Erdogan will be able to send back millions of Syrian refugees that have been in Turkey since the conflict started after the Arab Spring in 2011, and that will definitely and positively impact his ratings. Now, the second key player is Russia, and this is, if at all the Assad government falls, it is very bad news for Russia and for President Putin. This will significantly cut Russia's influence and Putin's influence, who's very closely aligned to the Assad regime since 2015, when Russia provided military assistance to the Bashar al-Assad regime. Will this be Moscow's Saigon? Well, time will only tell. But the uncertainty is bound to hit the Tartus naval base, that is the Soviet-era naval base in Syria, established since 1971. Now, the third key player in this is, of course, Iran. Again, very bad news for Iran if Assad loses power. It is a likelihood, given that a second major city has been grabbed by the rebels. Why? Because Iran will lose a major ally. And in fact, it will also lose to a close competitor and a regional competitor, Turkey. Remember, Turkey and Iran have been jostling for regional supremacy. And with one up for Turkey, this is very bad news for Iran. In fact, it will also end Iran's ability to rearm Hezbollah, since the route from Iran to Syria, Iran to Lebanon, in fact, goes via Syria, and it's likely to pretty much be out of bounds for Iranian military. Now, let's talk about who stands to gain. Israel stands to gain. For Israel, Syria is going to jihadists. It will mean more volatility and possibly bigger tensions later. But right now, with the Iranian military unable to reach Syria or Lebanon and aid Hezbollah, it will be a huge victory for Israelis, because it will mean lesser tensions and lesser possible threats. And finally, for the US, what does it mean? Under Trump 2.0, this is a huge win. Why? Russia out of Syria, Iran ally, Assad out of Syria, and the chance of being able to limit Hezbollah and be able to also, in fact, military reach out to Hezbollah is going to be very significant. So these are the main players in Syria, all of which stand to get massively impacted if Assad regime falls in the next couple of days. All right, as far as South Korea is concerned, well, let me tell our viewers that democracy is probably one of the most important virtues for a country. And for some, like India, it's part of our ethos. But for some nations, this has been a journey which has been not just recent, but also full of obstacles and some roadblocks. And that's exactly what South Korea is witnessing. And the happenings in South Korea are a constant reminder of the imperfect democracy that Seoul and people of South Korea live with. In fact, nearly all its presidents have faced impeachment. They've either been assassinated or have been jailed for corruption or have faced coups. So it's been a very imperfect ride to democracy for South Korea. And this report tells you why Seoul's latest attempt and the coup that was attempted is nothing but another chapter from the same playbook of presidential history, replete with martial law, corruption, and coups.
South Korea, a small and prosperous nation in East Asia with a per capita income of over $34,000. South Korea is one of the 4 Asian tigers that have turned into successful export-oriented economies, but its presidential report card has been checkered. South Korea's first president Ri's tenure saw autocracy, heavy-handed suppression of dissent. He resigned after massive public protests. Yoon's term was cut short by a military coup led by Major General Park Chung-hee. Park's takeover provided legitimacy to his military takeover. Park's tenure ended with his assassination after years of human rights violations and oppression. Park's successor, Choi Kyu-ha, had a short stint and was deposed by martial law imposed by Chun Do-hwan. Under Chun's 2 presidential terms, Gwangju uprising led to large-scale human rights violations. In 1996, he faced death sentence, later commuted to life sentence. Roh Tae-woo became South Korea's first democratically elected president, and he stepped down in 1993. He was sentenced to 17 years in jail. A decade later, Roh Moo-hyun faced impeachment. And Yoon's predecessor, South Korea's first female president, Park Geun-hye, was impeached, removed from office, and jailed.
All right, the big story, also the one that we are tracking right now, is the latest that's happening between US and China. They are locked in a battle to gain dominance over the semiconductor industry, and this has been going on for 3 years now. 3 years there have been export controls that the Biden administration has been imposing. Of course, only half-hearted measures, some of them, all still allowing China to continue unabated. But there have been a latest set of rounds of in fact, fines that have been put in place, measures that have been put in place by both sides. What does it lead to? And most importantly, what happens to the future of the chip industry that essentially controls the world? This report tells you.
In the ever-dynamic world of technology, semiconductors are unlocking new possibilities. From reshaping customer experience to mitigating risks, semiconductors or chips seem to be doing it all. The influence of chips has echoed across the globe for years. In the latest, the world's 2 biggest economies seem to be sparring to gain an upper hand in the race to unlock the true potential of semiconductors. Chips are crucial for the growth of many technologies such as artificial intelligence. This week, the Biden administration announced a sweeping set of export control on chip manufacturing equipment and software that will make it more difficult for Chinese companies like Huawei and ByteDance to develop cutting-edge AI.
美方的所谓报告，在没有任何实质证据的情况下，炮制诱导性的结论，对华泼脏水，搞栽赃陷害，仍是政治操弄溯源的老套路。 没有任何的可信度。
In retaliation, China banned exports of gallium, germanium, antimony, and other high-tech materials to the U.S. Gallium and germanium are key components in semiconductors. While the U.S. and China wrestle to exert their influence in the tech world, it can be an opportunity for India. New Delhi has benefited from the geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and China ever since Donald Trump's first term. China's export share in the U.S. has seen a decline since 2019. This has benefited countries like Vietnam, Mexico, and India, as they have witnessed an increase in export opportunities to the U.S. China's semiconductor market size was estimated at $180 billion in 2023. In comparison, the Indian semiconductor industry is expected to grow more than 2-fold over the next 6 years to reach $109 billion by 2030, which is up from $38 billion in 2023. India needs at least 10 more semiconductor chip fabrication companies to set up shop in the next decade. With Trump just weeks away from a return to the White House, New Delhi will be looking to grab all opportunities.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.